Working in behavioral health or managing an organization in the industry can be challenging. Regulations are constantly changing, and staying compliant is harder than ever. That's where the Behavioral Health Association of Providers can help. BHAP is a national association for those who work in behavioral health or addiction treatment. One of the ways we serve the community is by offering educational opportunities such as CE-based webinars and our Certificate in Addiction Treatment Marketing. BHAP also provides advocacy information so you can stay on top of new laws and regulations that will affect how you do business. Our members benefit from simple, effective, and relevant resources that keep you focused on what matters most, the health and well-being of your clients. Helping small and mid-market behavioral health providers access compliance resources and legal education, BHAP is the leading and unifying voice of treatment programs. You can find out more information, as well as sign up for our various newsletters, on our website, www.bhap.us. Hello, I'm glad you could join us today. Welcome to the webinar, Finding Your Dream Job or Candidate in Behavioral Health. My name is Angie Fiedler-Sutton, and I'm with the Behavioral Health Association of Providers. Did you know that Counselor Magazine, the official magazine of BHAP, has an international job board? Free for both employers and candidates, you can search by location or job interest. Create your free account today at jobs.counselormagazine.com. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Jordan Young is the CEO of Jordan & Associates, an associate member of BHAP. Jordan's personal recovery and desire to help others nudged him into his career in the behavioral health care. Since 2010, he's worked in positions where he helped over 4,000 patients find treatment that met their clinical, demographic, and financial needs. Designed and oversaw a national conference series where he formed relationships with hundreds of behavioral healthcare companies and thousands of industry individuals, and provide recruiting and consulting services for startup or established treatment centers and organizations servicing the treatment industry. His core values are shaped by his relationship with God, his family, and recovery. Jamie Vance is the founder at the Vance Group Healthcare Consulting. Jamie has worked for leading companies in behavioral health for over 15 years. He started on the ground floor and worked his way to chief marketing officer at 400-bed addiction treatment company, where he helped grow the company from $5 million to $30 million in revenue over 3 years by building out the digital marketing, admissions, alumni meeting, and sales teams. Jamie has a passion for seeing others realize success and take a coaching approach to get there. Jordan and Jamie, thank you for taking the time to present today. With that, I will hand the webinar over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So thank you guys for being a part of this. Angie put a poll there on the right-hand side that asks whether you're attending because you're looking for a job yourself or you're looking for a candidate search or neither or both. So if you get a chance, participate in that poll, we would appreciate it. All right, so this webinar is finding your dream job or dream candidate in behavioral health care. So the objectives for this presentation for attendees are best practices for evaluating a job opportunity in behavioral health, how to get your information to and pass the gatekeeper, and how to make an impression on decision makers. For attendees interested in hiring, we're going to discuss how to attract their ideal candidate, best practices for screening, hiring, training, and retaining candidates. And I'm probably going to be doing the majority of the first section geared towards people looking for new opportunities. We'll tag team it a bit, but Jamie's going to lead more of the second half for organizations interested in hiring. So with that, there we are. There are our bios again. So for candidates looking for their dream job in behavioral health care, we put down some questions for you to consider in looking for your next opportunity. A question that's going to determine whether or not an opportunity is one worth pursuing is in large part going to be decided by the organization that you're joining. So some research for deciding whether or not to join an organization is vital. Today we have so much information available to us online through the company's website You can dig into their website and you can get a really good feel for the organization and what they do. You don't get a very good feel for the culture of the organization itself, though. So some advice there would be get a feel for their reputation by asking around. So in asking around, that's asking around the industry. Gather feedback from people that have worked from them. If you have connections inside of the organization, whether it's current employees or past employees, that's huge. Get that feedback. But a word of advice when you are getting feedback from past employees, many times if an employee has left an organization on not solid terms, they may disparage the employer. So they may do that unfairly as well. So, you're only getting one side of the story whenever you're speaking with former employees. So take that into consideration, but still do your research and asking around the industry, ask inside the organization, and digging into their website. So once you've decided this is an organization that you're comfortable aligning yourself with, let's look at the job itself and how that aligns with where you want to be in the future. So imagine yourself 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years from now. So what position do you want to be at in that time frame, and what type of organization do you wish to be a part of? So in thinking about that, consider how the current job will help you get there. If this is a destination position, meaning a position that you want to stay at forever, then consider things like the organization's stability within the industry. Or if this is not a position that you would consider to be a destination position, consider what experience you're going to gain along the way with this new role and with this new organization.
Versus security aspect. And that, some positions are with a newer growing company, and everything that you want isn't going to be in place yet, because it's a new growing organization and it shouldn't be in place. So know that if that's what you choose, and have that flexibility around that, knowing that there's a greater opportunity. Or, if you want stability, go with a company that is, well etched in the landscape and, has been operating for a long time and has that stability, but it's usually either one or the other. So, and, there's a saying that goes, if you never want to take risks, just get used to working for people that do. But, there's both of that. And I talk to candidates often that, they'll be looking at an opportunity and they say, what's the opportunity for upward growth? I said, well, if you're on the phone with the CEO of the company right now, that means that there's a lot of space between you and I that hasn't been filled yet. So, always, look at the potential opportunity, the risk, where you're at in your current life at the moment, and what works for you.
Those are great points, Jamie. So now that you've decided that this is an organization you want to be a part of and a position that you're interested in, how do you get your foot in the door for the organization? Or something that I've been asked by quite a few candidates is, how do you get your foot in the door of the industry? So for people that have not had a job in behavioral health care, how do you get that first job in the industry? Any way possible. So if you have identified an organization that you want to be a part of, check out their website. Search their company leaders. Try finding industry-specific social media groups, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn. Network with people in those groups. There are tons. I'm probably a part of about 30 of them myself, and I get requests frequently, almost daily, to get added to new ones. So get in those groups, network with people, network with folks, and try to find a way to get your foot in the door, either with the organization or with the industry. Just a personal story, I recently had a candidate who had good sales experience but did not have experience within behavioral health. It was a passion of hers. And that was how she got that first job. Was she continued to reach out to people, and she joined people within the industry, and she joined networking groups and grew a network within behavioral healthcare without actually even being a part of behavioral healthcare as a career at that point. And that helped open the door for her for that first opportunity. So in reaching out to connections within an organization, use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great resource. You can look up the company name. You can see all of the people that are on LinkedIn that work with that organization. Connect with those people. If you don't have any luck with that, try people that are well connected in the industry. See if they can help you get your foot in the door, either by making an introduction to someone who works at the organization or providing you with some sort of advice. So look for those very well connected people within the industry and see how they can help you out. You're muted, Jamie.
Okay. Well, I can think of two instances in the industry that really stick out to me here. And one was the one that I wish I would have hired. This guy went on to really do great things at Summit Behavioral Health. And he went to a behavioral health conference without having a job in behavioral health yet, and took meetings with executives. And I was one of his meetings. I wasn't in the position at the moment to make that hire, but looking back on it, I wish I would have. And then the other one was somebody who reached out to me on LinkedIn and offered to fly themselves to where I was to meet with me. And I did it. They had zero industry experience, although they were in, the recovery community. It was single-handedly the best hire I've ever made in my life, just about. And that person, all of that hunger translated directly into the job. And so they attacked the position with that same amount of passion. It turned out great. And so, I always make hires on how I feel about the person. I really don't read resumes, but I make hires. I make hires about how I feel about the person, and I got a really good feeling, and it turned out to be absolutely true. So keep that in mind.
Which is resumes. So I don't know that there is one standard template for presenting a resume. I see a lot of resumes. So for perspective, I'm actively working with 12 different treatment centers to help them hire key staff. Not all staff, but business development and leadership positions. So I do see a lot of resumes, and I can tell you that the greatest resume in the world is not going to get you a job by itself. It's not even going to get you that first interview necessarily, but I can also tell you that a poorly constructed resume, at least with me, is going to guarantee that, with me and with a lot of people that screen through resumes, it's going to guarantee that you will not get the position.
Absolutely.
And it'll guarantee that you will not get that first interview.
Yeah, we always have somebody screen the resumes for us and then present us, with the candidates that look like they both have the experience and then the professionalism. And I think that professionalism shows through in the resume process. And sometimes we'll use resumes for notes, during an interview we want to kind of reference, but yeah, it has to be put together well. There are professional services for helping with that. Any investment in that area is probably well spent.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And just a few general basics. Contact information. Make sure that you have your contact information visible. Your phone number, your email, your current location, resume length. Try, if at all possible, to keep it to no more than 2 pages. Your formatting, use simple fonts. Don't use a cursive type font where people can't easily read what you're trying to articulate in your resume. And use bullet points. Don't use a paragraph format. And when you're using the bullet points, try to limit them. Try to limit them to maybe 3 to 5 per position. A resume with 14 bullet points for a position that was 4 jobs and 17 years ago is not something that I ever want to see. And a good resource for what not to do is enclosed at the bottom. And I think that if you're interested, Angie will be sending out the handouts where you can check out this website. But that's a good article with some things not to do with your resume. All right, Zoom and phone interviews. So once you've gained interest, you're moving along. And I actually asked a friend of ours, Jamie, Steve Denai, the Vice President of Business Development with Lakeview Health, for a little bit of feedback on this.
Excellent. Spoke to him yesterday.
Yeah, and he's, and this is something he's passionate about. So he made sure to make these points. He said, make sure that you are in a stable environment. Make sure that it's clean, it's free of distractions, that you have a stable internet connection. Make sure that you dress up for the Zoom. Act like it's a face-to-face interview, because honestly, it's no less important than a face-to-face interview. It's just a little bit more convenient. And probably most important, just because you're on Zoom does not mean you shouldn't ask for the job. Always ask for the job and always ask for the next step. And Jamie, I know that you're passionate about that last part there.
Absolutely. I'm passionate about that part. And it's like I was speaking about earlier, if you don't show me that you want the position, and if you seem, it's okay to ask questions, and I want to be interviewed too. Definitely. I love it when people flip it back around and interview me. I think that shows that they're serious about it. But timidity is not a good look on this kind of stuff, because we've got one opportunity in a very short time to get to know you as a candidate. We need to spend that time well. And the other key thing I think about this technology piece and Zoom is, this is a personal thing for me, but if a candidate can't operate the technology, and I hire for sales mostly in leadership, and if a candidate gets on is not prepared on that technical platform, it's an immediate pass for me most of the time, because they should have that. And so if they get on and they can't, they didn't know how to do it, or we asked them to do a presentation, they didn't know how to do it before the presentation, I can't expect that to translate well into the workplace. So, teach yourself what you don't know. If you don't recognize the platform, get familiar with it before the meeting. If it is virtual, and definitely make sure your lighting's good. In this day and time, employers are looking for candidates who can operate in a virtual environment, because it's part of the job and will be moving forward to some degree. So those are my thoughts on that.
And so face-to-face interviews, just some simple things. When you're going to a face-to-face interview, put your best foot forward. And I mean that in all ways possible. That's with your dress. Make sure that you're dressed professionally. You're dressing for the job that you want. Maybe not the job that you already have. when in the interview, make eye contact. Make eye contact with the person that's interviewing you. I know me personally, if I ask someone a question and they give me a response and they're gazing all around, not looking me in the eye, that to me, it either shows that the person is either not confident, or I don't necessarily trust what the person is saying because they're not looking me square in the eye. So use eye contact, smile, act like you're excited to be a part of the interview and the possibility of joining the organization. I recently had a client that was interviewing a candidate who, on all other fronts, seemed like she was going to be a good fit. Seemed like she was going to be a good addition to their team, but throughout the face-to-face, or this was actually a Zoom interview, but the person, I don't know if this person was nervous or they were just not excited. They had a very kind of grim look on their face. So act excited, smile, make eye contact, put your best foot forward in all ways. And one thing that we did not include in here is be early. If you show up for a 12 o'clock interview at 12 o'clock, then you're late. Show up early. Being early is being on time.
Well, these are great points and very valuable. And together, Jordan and I probably, just through my consulting practice, and then we pretty much exclusively use him for our recruiting, interview tons of candidates every month. And what I need from you in interviews is to sell me on why you would be a good candidate. And, oftentimes we'll have that and people will just be reading off of slides or just really, kind of non-committal on certain things. And it's really not the time for that. It's really, we have a short period of time to get this employer to feel really good about hiring you. Let's get that done. And so be ready to talk about yourself. There are some times when talking about yourself is not a good play. That is the time to present why you are the right candidate, and also to get an understanding of why this is the best position for you. So when people don't do that, it really leaves us confused and wondering, how did they get to this place in the interview? So yeah, really make sure that when you show up, ready to do that. It's not a conversation, just a casual conversation. It's got a purpose and an intention.
And just further to your point there, Jamie, make sure that you have thoroughly researched the organization that you are interviewing for. I had a candidate a couple years ago, and this was embarrassing to me, but they made it through my phone interview, my screen. They got to the corporate recruiter for an interview and thought they were interviewing for an organization with a similar name. And when they told me that, no. They made it to the third interview and started referencing something that this other organization with a similar name does. And so the interview was done right there. Their candidacy was out the window. So make sure that you know the organization, you research them, research what they do. That was going back to the beginning of the interview cycle there that we talked about, but just hitting it again, because that's something that you want to make sure that you, in a sense, you name drop. If they do EMDR or DBT or CBT, or they have a certain approach to alumni, reference that. Reference that to the people doing the interview. Know that you have actually prepared and you are knowledgeable about the organization that you're potentially going to be joining. So interview questions, the question behind the question, and things to consider. So for this one, we just have three questions, but there could be a lot more. Hopefully you guys can see these questions clearly. I know that they weren't, the fonts weren't pulling up large enough earlier, but can you tell me about yourself? So I've had numerous candidates that have lost the interview on this question alone. People that have made it to the final interview and they have rambled on endlessly about when asked, can you tell me about yourself? I've had hiring managers that have called me back and said, Jordan, and this person, I asked them to tell me about themselves, and they rambled on for 25 minutes out of a 30-minute interview. You know, I can't hire someone who doesn't have the self-awareness to realize that I probably have more than one question for them. So in preparing for the interview, and do mock interviews with yourself. Know what you're going to say to these questions. Someone asking you to tell them about yourself is not some innovative type question. This is a standard question. Oh, tell me about yourself. And it's not just an interview, just when you meet someone in general. So have an answer for that, but make sure that you can articulate in a concise way who you are that stands out to them. And another question that you will probably see, or that at least frequently comes up in the interview process, is why are you seeking a new opportunity? So think about how you can answer this in a way that doesn't badger your former employer or your former boss, in a way that doesn't make the company that you're interviewing with think that you're just going to jump ship the minute that something new comes along. Another question is, where do you see yourself in the future? So 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Show that you've actually given this some thought, and in your answer, show the company that you're interviewing with that you have somehow envisioned yourself with that company in the future, and that you have envisioned them in your future. Something that I like to point out to candidates, a tip in the interview process is, when you're giving answers to questions, do it in a way where you're envisioning yourself at that company and the way that you're performing and you're going to perform at that company, and plant that subliminally in the mind of the person that's doing the interview. You make them know that you have envisioned yourself in this role and you've envisioned yourself succeeding in this role. Amy, do you have anything to that one?
Yeah, I really, just 100% on all fronts. And I think it's worthwhile to spend some time, because it's in an interview, it's not a typical environment. Kind of some behind the scenes stuff. I want you to feel uncomfortable in an interview, especially if it's a larger position. I want you to be uncomfortable because I want to see how you react to some pretty serious questions. And so I might ask you, tell me about a time that you were dishonest in the workplace, or, it could be anything like that. And I want to see how people are going to react, and I want to know the answer to that question. But I think spending some time thinking about these, like, I'm going to be talking about myself and who I am and what my qualities are as they pertain to this position. Maybe I shouldn't just walk into the interview without having thought about that. Why are you seeking a new opportunity in this space, especially? One of the biggest answers I get is they say, well, the employer I was working for was doing some stuff that, they're very vague, but they're still kind of sort of trashing the former person. And what that tells me is, well, why did you work there? Like, period. Like, that makes me question your decision making. So maybe don't use that as an answer, and then where do you see yourself I want that answer to come pretty quickly. So, because I want somebody who thinks about those kind of things in their life. So if that's not something that you've been thinking about, maybe you should do that, because in an interview, it's like, hey, if you had a magic wand, and could just put yourself at any point in your career, what does that look like? What does it look like to have fully actualized into the professional that you want to be? I'm only going to hire people who know that about themselves. So if they don't, then chances are they're not going to have the passion and the vision to carry out the position I'm hiring for. And certainly that leads us to the question behind the question, for sure. So that's what I think about it.
Perfect. And so going to your final steps, how to ask for the job and close the deal. So I know many candidates that have made it to a final interview and they lost out on the job because the hiring manager said, Jordan, they did not close me. And in any sales situation, you have to finalize a deal in some fashion or another. An interview is no different from any other sales situation. So what you're doing there is you're selling yourself to the company over every other candidate. So you have to give them a reason to hire you, and you have to ask for the job. If asked, and Jamie, you can speak to this, but when asked, why are you the right fit? Why should I hire you for this position? This doesn't need to relate to if it's a position in recovery, because I'm in recovery, or if it's, a banking position because I have a bank account. You need to tell them something about you, like, well, because yes, this is my purpose for doing this, but I'm great at sales. I'm great at, from a clinical standpoint, I'm great at showing empathy and connecting with people and helping them feel better. I can be compassionate. Give them substantial reasons why they want to hire you because of traits that you possess that will make you successful in this role, not because I'm left-handed or
Right.
something like that.
I always ask this question. It's a very important one to me because usually, especially right now, I'm a consultant working with an organization. So my role is to help them to deliver the candidate that's going to be right. And they're looking to my expertise to help kind of suss that out to fit that position. And so I'll often ask, what about you is going to make you successful in this position? You would not believe how many people say, basically paraphrase, because I'm sober, or whatever version of that. And then that's an immediate, like, you really miss that one. It's an immediate, like, far miss. I encourage, kind of an inside thing is that I encourage everybody, and I get this from people smarter than me, because I try to learn too how to hire the right people. And in those studies, I've found that I hire on character. I want to know who you are when things are bad. I want to know who you are when things are tough. I want to know who you are when things are good, and what you're going to do when nobody's looking. That's what I want to know. So I'm going to try to tease that out. And so if you just kind of miss some layups in the interview process, these are the biggest opportunities. So if you nail these, you've got the job, but when asked the question, why are you a good candidate? Or what qualities do you have that are going to help you? If we're kind of having to help you draw that out, or that's not a natural thing, then we usually move on. So really, pay attention to those questions as they come up.
And so moving along to the hiring side, how do you find your dream candidate? And Jamie, I'm going to give the controls of the PowerPoint over to you.
Yeah, identifying the characteristics and the background you want. I think that you and your team, your leadership team, we see this all too often of they don't really know what formula works for them. And so, I think sitting down and for each position, sometimes each territory, sometimes different markets or whatever, it's a specific formula, or it could be. And if you haven't had that conversation, you and your partners may be wanting to hire two different people. And so what that causes is two different sets of expectations. Or you may even in your head be setting yourself up for some unreasonable expectations accidentally if you're not clear about what it is you want and why you might want a certain type of person. So I think that, really starting with your core values of your organization, what are some absolutes for us? And then identifying not just what are some absolutes for us, but how are we going to build it into our interview process that we determine these about each candidate? Maybe that is, if I'm using Jordan for a recruiter, there's a questionnaire that every candidate has to answer, before we even look at their resume, the screening process. Maybe, it's certain questions that we ask in the interview. I personally always do 3-stage interviews. So there's, opportunity for that. But I think that one of the most important things, because I hire a lot of different positions, but mostly it's in like the business development realm, marketing realm. And people say, well, we just want somebody that people like. Well, okay, we'll get you somebody that everybody likes. And then they're going to fire them 6 months later because they didn't put 30 people in treatment. Well, likability and performance don't necessarily live together all the time. It's not a direct correlation. So do you want somebody, what do you want? And then, we want somebody, the worst thing is want somebody with a book of business. That's for whatever people got that in their head one time, that in the sales part of this stuff, that means something undeniably, and it doesn't. There's 17 questions you should ask after that to clarify that that's even a good piece. So I think that, just really getting clear with your team. If it's a clinician, what are we looking for due to, what we need? And I think that people don't spend enough time with that. And then it puts the candidates at risk too. So, what are the most likely indicators of future success? Do they have the right education? What are my musts? I need to know what those are. So things that we can't move on. And then what can we be flexible on? And I need to know that before I go into an interview. So maybe there's some things like extracurricular activities. So if they don't play foosball, that's okay. I like foosball, but they don't. But, even with education, do some things trump other things? So what's most important, and then having priorities around each one of those. Determine a process for vetting candidates. I think that process is huge. I think you should always be looking at resumes and having them on your desk. Even though earlier I said I don't look at resumes, what I meant by that is that resumes to me don't sell a candidate. That interpersonal interaction is 100%. Having that outside help, like either a recruiter, or at minimum, having someone in the company whose primary position or a big part of it is talent. Because I've tried to do it by myself and it's virtually impossible I made the biggest mistakes doing a leadership position and then trying to do all of my own hiring process, front to back. It was terrible, and I won't do it again. And then you got to attract a candidate, especially in today's competitive market, especially in behavioral health. And what I do a 3-stage interview personally. On the first interview, the first stage of that is selling them on the company and the opportunity. That does a couple things that when they show up, you got to be honest, but when they show up, they're bought into the process and they're not having to spend time then buying into the process. I don't want that. I think some strategies are, having a really good job posting. I've seen job postings to where it's like, you should, be knocking down our door to work for us. And it's kind of egotistical and no. But really, what are they going to be a part of? What kind of culture are they about to step into? And then too, another great thing that I got from Nigel Green was when you do hire the candidate, you should poll them to see how realistic was the culture you talked about. So do a cultural survey a little bit after you hired. So that'll give you, because we all think we have a great culture, and that's one of the things we use to bring candidates in. But if that's not really true, and sometimes we just don't know, that can really work against us in the hiring and retention of candidates. Right. So the job posting boards, recruiters, social media groups, LinkedIn. I personally don't do postings. I don't want a candidate who doesn't have a job. That's me. I want a candidate who's killing it somewhere and has a career and is doing something. There have been a few rare instances to where somebody has been out of a position. There's a great explanation around it, but that's not the pool that I want to search from. So I use recruiters specifically, and that expense is paid for itself in spades over time.
Jamie, just to expand upon your point quickly, my experience in helping treatment centers hire key staff, and it's only primarily leadership and business development positions, but in speaking of seeking out candidates, just to further your point about job postings and job board, the quality of the candidates that you're going to receive, from my observation, has been significantly less than if you have someone who's seeking out the candidates for you, because they know the profile and it's not just randomly people going through and clicking a button to quick apply. So you're going to get you're going to get a lower quantity of candidates if you have someone searching for you, but the quality, from my observation, has been significantly higher. And that's for those types of positions. If you're looking at other positions, well, really any position, I would encourage you, try multiple methods. I've had to supplement some job searches before posting the position online, and do whatever you can. Get as many candidates as possible if you're not finding your way by finding the candidate you want by just one
posting
method.
For me has never worked out great. I've had to do it sometimes. Usually if it's a position that I wouldn't want to necessarily incur a recruiting fee. Sorry, they're hammering next door. If it's a position that I wouldn't want to incur a recruiting fee, I would definitely do like word of mouth. So ask the other teammates, hey, who's the best at this? And then set it up that way. Usually works out good. So how can you get to best know a candidate? And is the perfect candidate joining in 6 months better than a very good candidate joining tomorrow? Jordan, do you want to take this one real quick?
Yeah, one thing that I want to encourage employees that are looking to hire to keep in mind is candidates actively seeking a new opportunity, they probably have a timeline too. I've seen companies lose out on candidates that they really wanted quite a few times because their process is too slow. They have too many steps involved in their vetting process. And I understand when organizations want to have multiple voices involved in the hiring process, but just be aware that the candidate, they have a timeline too. And dragging on the interview process for a candidate that is itching to get out of a situation they're currently in, or someone who needs a new opportunity desperately because they're out of work, you're going to lose a candidate if you drag it out too long. That has happened numerous times, unfortunately, with clients of mine. So remember that the candidates have timelines too.
Evaluating the resumes and the job history, I look for gaps, and I want somebody to, especially in our field, there's going to be gaps, right? There's gaps in mine, significant ones for certain periods of time. And there's always a lot of times that little, 30-day gap, and then they seem to get better jobs after that. But I want people to be able to talk about that. And I think it's important, even if we all, assume the best in everybody, just to also, it's not that I mind, but I want to see how they frame it. I want to see how people frame that up and what their perspective of it is. I've talked to some candidates who go on a bitter rant about how that's everybody else's fault or whatever, and not the guy for me. Definitely, I think that is important. And I like to make sure that my team knows a formula for evaluating resumes, that resumes should make it to a phone call stage. What I do is set it up for somebody else looks at the resumes. And then if it qualifies, then I get that resume with a scheduled phone call. And on that phone call, the first one is, learning a little bit about the candidate, selling them on the process. And then it moves to, they talk to the team, then they do a presentation. But also job history, there are some, people that have been at places for a short period of time. It's not the same. And sometimes that's because their trajectory is like this. And in my own case, I was recruited out of positions for a while after I had reached, kind of success in those positions, and that's good. But if somebody's had 18 jobs less than a year, I wonder about that. So we need some answers there. And how important is a presentation on paper versus in person? This is huge. I really make some big decisions here. I want people to show me that they have, good level of presentation skills, no matter what the position. I feel like so much of life and business is communication, and I've never seen bad communicators be good employees, and so or teammates. And so I think that the presentation is huge. I think that we were just talking earlier, and I really don't like it if we're setting and doing a presentation and the person's giving the presentation, but they don't stand up to give the presentation. They kind of sit or do whatever's easiest. I see that a lot. They'll default to what is easiest for them and makes them most comfortable versus what presents the information in the best possible way. And I want the information to be presented, and I want to know that that person within our organization is always going to do their very best to deliver good presentations, whether they be clinical presentations, sales presentations, leadership visions, whatever that may be. I want to make sure that they're able and comfortable in doing that. I think that that's just a baseline skill of today's workplace. So interview questions and responses, I'm probably the worst person to ask about this. Because I really believe in the hiring process. And I also really believe that it is my responsibility as the hiring person to get that right. And so I ask tough questions. And I want to really know, I don't leave things unanswered. So many times people hire a candidate, but when they're hired, they don't really know what their performance was or how they even measured their own performance at their last position. So, were you successful in your last position? Yes. Show me how you were successful. Tell me. What does success mean to you? What does that mean? Was it because all the clients liked you? Was it because of this? Like, define it. Like, I want to know. And so many times we talk around those things. And the interview is a time to be really deliberate, because the reason I came to this conclusion was because I've ended up needing to terminate people. And when I ended up needing to terminate people, I took personal responsibility for that being my mistake. And it was. And in the instances where that was true, it was my fault because I didn't get the information I needed. Person was just who they were and showed up and did what they did. But I could have determined that from the onset. And I didn't. I assumed things about the person. And I think that's the worst thing we can do. Maybe assume based on what other people had told me, or I'd assume based on what I thought, but I didn't get black and white about it and get some real information. And I think that, I look at it is I want to cause this person the least amount of harm possible. I mean, part of my role is putting them in a position of their work life that they're going to, get fulfillment and joy out of. I don't want to have to end that. So I usually hold myself very responsible if I have to do that. So I think that the questions are huge, and I want a deliberate and honest response. And I really look at those responses and take them for the gospel at the moment. And don't tell myself stories about them. Whatever they say, I take it at that value.
One more point to that. I want to see that a person has been thoughtful prior to the interview and given thought to how they're going to succeed in this position, how they're going to flourish within the company. So I want to see responses from candidates that show that I've envisioned being successful and I've envisioned being at this organization, and this is how I'm going to do it.
Absolutely. And presenting your opportunity is one that cannot be passed up. I mean, sure, they can pass it up. But I think it's a two-way street here in that I need to get to know my candidate. And I learned this in leadership, that you can't motivate people if you don't know what motivates them. And so I think oftentimes we keep it kind of one-sided, and we don't ask questions about what their goals are personally for their family, et cetera, to even know how our organization would fit into that picture. And so I think that that's really important, and making sure that those boxes are checked for our candidates of being able to determine and understand how our organization would be fulfilling for them, and knowing which ways those are based on what their personal interests and professional interests are. And then they will feel like it can't be passed up. But telling them how awesome we are never really works, because we really need to know what it is that they need in their life, and how we measure up to that, and how our vision and values measure up to that, and our work life and our culture. There are certain things, especially now in organizations. I was in an organization recently that hired, a certain demographic, and they had cold brew on tap, and it was like kind of free stuff everywhere. And those were really cool things. That would not be important to me at all. Like, that aspect, for some people would be awesome. For me, I'll get my own cold brew. Like I just, I need to know other things about this, but the free cold brew for some people was like, I'm in, so it just depends. And what you're trying to attract too. So gaining commitment, I always, want to see this is when we're finished. And two, one thing I didn't get to describe because I had to go next door because somebody was hammering on my wall, oddly, at a time that I'm doing a webinar. Perfect. I politely asked them to stop. But is one thing that's really important at the onset of the interview process is to let the candidate know the timeline. I recently made a hire because one of you guys didn't do that. And I got the candidate. If it's one of you guys, but it was somebody didn't give them appropriate expectations about the timeline, and they felt like they weren't being taken seriously. I hear that more times than I should. So on that first call, I like to lay out, okay, here's, we're going to do these three. It usually takes this long. You can expect this, this, and this. And after that, it'll be about 2 weeks before you would actually get the position, at which time we would be doing these things. And just really hammer that out, and your recruiter can help with that too. But closing the deal is huge. And I'll often tell people, I think there's a cultural thing that has happened to where I had people that took 10 days to respond to an offer letter. It's been more lately than ever before. And for me, that's, if it takes you 10 days to tell me you want to work, then no, that won't work for me. But I kind of say, we'll send over an offer if I'm going to. And if you could let us know something within a day or two, that would be great. If you have any additional questions, let us know. How are you feeling about it? Just ask them right there. How are you feeling about the position after all of this? After the interview, after everything, honestly, how are you feeling? And is there anything we could have done to, help you better understand what you're getting into? And don't drag out the process. Give clear expectations and what they are and aren't. And one thing that doesn't happen enough is people assume or think things based on the way a candidate presented himself or herself. And one thing that I would encourage, especially if you're working with a recruiter or it's a big position, is to tell the candidate. So it'll be that one thing that they did that threw off one of the team members, maybe something they said or whatever. And a lot of times people just close the book when everything else was good. What I like to do is to use that for personal growth for the candidate, but also for us as an organization to say, hey, want to have a quick call with you. Okay, in the interview, this came up. And what I made up about that was this. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that. That's huge. And I think that oftentimes, we get all the way down the process with somebody, but one little tiny thing will kind of tip the scales for us. And it's about whatever we make up in our heads about it. So, and the interview process, I think for the candidate and for ourselves need to be pretty expeditious if possible. We want to take the right amount of time to get the candidate, but realize that, they could be talking to somebody else besides us too. And I see people lose people because they don't respond pretty often. I'm sure you see that a whole lot, Jordan. Miscellaneous tips.
Yeah. Oftentimes, if someone is interviewing with you, it's like someone who's seeking treatment. Oftentimes they're calling 3 or 4 other people for treatment. Same thing goes with a job. Oftentimes they're in conversations with multiple other people. Yeah, and I know that we're short on time. The one probably single most important miscellaneous tip I want to say to both candidates and to employers is watch your social media. Watch your social media. Then it can be, I have seen candidates lose jobs, and I've seen employers lose candidates because their social media is unprofessional, or most likely it's highly political. And I've seen it on both sides. I've seen conservative, liberal organizations, individuals lose candidates and potential jobs because they were very outspoken on their personal social media. So just be aware of that. They are going to check you out. They are going to research your social media if you're a company or if you're an individual. So make sure that that's
your platform for whatever you want. That's your right as a person. It's also our right to look at it. So just know that. I mean, personally, my wife always says, kids and puppy dogs, that's all you get to do. My social media, I would challenge you to go find me, and you can look back through it, and nothing exciting. There's not one single opinion on there. Self-preservation, maybe, but it's definitely a policy of mine. I have rejected so many candidates, especially in this field. If you're applying for a job in forward-facing in addiction treatment, and you were out, at the club last night, doing Jello shots, I don't know. I mean, those two things don't work for me. So, if you're just a super inflammatory person online, no matter which leaning you have, if you're inflammatory, you're going to be inflammatory in my company, and I'm not going to put up with that. So, I don't deal with it, so yeah, that's a huge tip, especially, and the last thing on that is that my father-in-law is probably definitely one of the kind of foremost PR experts. And he just said, people talk too much. Say less, and so, I think that goes for that too, because there's a lot of qualified candidates out there, and it would just be awful if one, post or something like that kept you from getting a position. And as we've seen of late, it's certainly helped people lose their current position. So always good food for thought. And thank you so much for being here today. And thank you, Jordan, for having me. And it's always a pleasure to work with you. And thank you, Behavioral Health Association of Providers, for having us today also.
Yeah, thank you guys for attending. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Angie.
Okay, I know we went a little over, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat. The evaluation form is already up. Feel free to click it up. Like I said, anybody who fills that out in the next 10 days gets a coupon code worth 10% off any of our webinars that are for sale. Also a reminder that Counselor Magazine, the official magazine of Behavioral Health Association Provider, does have an international job board, which is free to use on both sides. So feel free to, if you're looking for a job or if you've got jobs to list, I put the link in the chat. Getting a lot of feedback of terrific information, great information. So I actually have a quick question. COVID obviously has changed a lot, which is one of the plugs here. Where would you, in the interview process, would you bring up, the ability to work remotely? Because that's obviously becoming a trend nowadays, now that everybody's doing that.
For me, from a candidate standpoint, I feel like they should bring that up at the very onset. I think the first interview they should ask whomever is screening them, okay, is this going to be face-to-face or is this going to be remote? I had a candidate recently, great candidate, perfect for the position, did not feel comfortable going for face-to-face meetings, and so the position was not for her. But she saved herself, she saved me, she saved the hiring organization a lot of time by expressing her thoughts on it.
Looks like no questions. So I want to thank Jordan Young and Jamie Vance for presenting today. Thanks as well to you for participating. We hope that you join us for future BHAP webinars. You can sign up for our various newsletters, which include emails specific to upcoming events, at our website, www.bhap.us. This concludes today's webinar. Thanks again.